Hello, folks. Welcome to Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm the host for this episode, and I'm Balaam Usitz. My co-host, Mike, is not available this week, so I'm doing this one solo. This is our podcast about sailing and cruising the East Coast of the United States. In some episodes, we focus on passages and destinations, and in other episodes, we talk about boats, equipment, and techniques. And in this episode, we have an interesting person we're going to talk to. So we have a guest, and this guest's name is Bob Forman. It turns out Bob and I have known each other kind of from a distance, on and off for a number of years. We first met when I was working at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and he and I are both graduates of that fine engineering school. And our paths crossed because he was doing some volunteer work there, and I was running the business incubator at that time. And we kind of struck up a friendship, and then we sort of parted ways and didn't interact at all. And then by chance, we met again a few weeks ago. So I thought it'd be great to have him on the podcast. And I'll tell you why. This guy's got a lot of sailing experience. He's a veteran of many Newport to Bermuda races, and he's also a veteran of two transatlantic races called Transat, which is actually the oldest ocean race. First one went off in 1866. So he's quite an accomplished sailor, cruised all around the East Coast of the United States, and has a pretty extensive and impressive racing resume as well. So I have him on for 2 episodes, and it was a long conversation we had. We talked about all sorts of things, and in this first episode, which is this one, the first 7 or 8 minutes of the episode is Bob and I sort of reminiscing and talking about old times. And then we sort of dived into the sailing stuff. And I decided to leave the conversation in there where we were reminiscing because it's just a way of you guys to get to know us, me, and Bob a little better. So I thought it was valuable. If you don't like that, just kind of fast forward through that and you can dive into the sailing stuff. So this is the first episode. The next episode will follow. It's basically a continuation of our conversation. So I hope you enjoy it. It was certainly good talking with him, and I had a great time. So give the episode a listen. Thanks. I'm trying to remember when we saw each other last.
It was probably when you left the incubator.
Yeah.
That was so frustrating.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It could have been such a gold mine for RPI.
Yeah. Well, part of the president's job, whether you agree with it or not, is to lead the organization and decide where they're going to go and where they're not going to go. And those decisions were made.
When you look at what it costs to build the Impact Center,
yeah,
and what it would have cost to do a nice job on the incubator,
yeah,
and plus, I mean, Stu and I worked at no charge,
Yeah.
That didn't cost them anything.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So, thanks.
Looks like you sometimes bad things turn into good things.
Yeah.
It didn't work out for you there. You left and started a venture capital group and retire.
Yeah.
Simon got frustrated.
He left. Yeah.
And started a company, had a liquidity event, and is doing, now has a nice business refurbishing, or restoring buildings in downtown Troy. So
yeah,
it's worked out for both of you guys.
Well, I've always embraced change.
Yeah,
I'm one of those folks. Okay, that's fine. Time to go do something else. Yeah. And that's always it. Knock on wood, it's worked out for me.
Yeah.
And I have enough. I've always had enough self-confidence that if I got to go figure out how to do something else, and I've also had a lot of varied interest. So, that help energize me.
Yeah.
I'll go figure out how to do something else.
Right.
Yeah.
That's about what I wound up doing there
Yeah.
because I was already retired.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I got on the board of Gentiva, which is the largest home health care and hospice company in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. That worked out well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to do a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
I've been on a handful of boards. Of course, with the venture business, I'm on all the boards that I led, all the investments I led. So
Right.
that's been pretty good.
That's great experience.
Yeah. But those are all, those are all done.
Right.
And I've been on a couple not-for-profit boards, a hospital board, et cetera.
Right.
And if I could find a board or two, or maybe even three to get involved with, I would enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, how old are you now, Bella?
I'll be 69 in another 30 days.
Young kid.
Yeah.
Young
Yeah.
kid.
Well,
Yeah.
age is a relative number.
Right. It's a relative number, but
That's right.
you still have runway to get on a major cup. Most boards have, you know, sunset rules where you got to retire. I
Yes.
think a lot of them now are 75.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, if something comes along, that'd be great. I'd enjoy it. I'm certainly not looking for full-time employment. I'm enjoying retiring
Yeah.
or retirement. I'm sailing a lot. Doing other things that I really enjoy doing. So it's been great.
So what kind of boat do you have?
So I have a Hunter
Uh-huh.
45
Oh, no.
that I keep on Narragansett Bay.
Right.
Great coastal cruiser, which is what we do, what my
Yeah.
wife and I and my kids do.
Yeah.
It's spacious, it's big,
Yeah. Yeah.
it sails reasonably well,
Right. Right.
and it really works well for us.
Yeah, good. Good.
And so that's been a lot of fun for sure.
Right.
Yep, just kind of bopping around Narragansett Bay and Long Island Sound and Buzzards Bay, and that's pretty much what we do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually, speaking of Simon, Simon bought a boat with very little sailing experience,
Right.
and he bought it in Florida, and I helped Simon and his son Sawyer bring it up from Florida.
Did you? Yeah.
So it was the three of us, yeah, and that was a combination of outside and coming up the ICW as well. It's kind of
Right.
we bounce back and forth depending upon weather and stuff. But that was an old boat. It was a Passport 40.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember what year it was, but they haven't been made. Those boats haven't been made for a while, and so yeah, we blazed off on that and had a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you two maintain contact?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we still run into each other on occasion, and we have a group that includes Mark Rice,
Uh-huh.
Chuck Rancourt, Glenn Dole, Jerry, myself, and Simon. So basically, all former incubator directors. And
Was Rice? Was he?
he was one of the incubator directors. Yeah,
Uh,
before he became a professor.
oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we get together, once a year, maybe twice a year.
Yeah. What's he doing now?
So he left RPI and went to Babson,
Right.
and became a dean at Babson, and then left dean of the graduate program at Babson, then left Babson and went to Worcester Poly and became dean of the business school in Worcester Poly, and then retired from there, and I think was retired for like
Well, the president of Worcester wasn't she from RPI?
Yes,
Yeah.
she was.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so Mark was there during that time.
Right.
And then he was retired about 6 months and got a call from Babson, and he was provost at Babson for quite a period of time.
Yeah.
And then he recently sort of stepped down from that, and I think is kind of teaching about half time these days at Babson still. Yeah.
Good for him.
So yeah, so when Mark went to Babson, Bill Stitt, he sort of hired Bill Stitt and I to teach in this accelerated MBA program that they had there for sort of experienced professionals. So it was mid-career folks,
Right.
and so we kept in touch because of that. We'd see each other. We would Bill and I co-taught 6 sessions, 6 3-day 6. Let me rephrase that: 6 1.5-day sessions. So this was one of those weekend MBAs.
Right.
And it amazed me because this talks to you about the notion of picking something you want to be really good at and raising that flag up high, which is what Babson did. I mean, they picked entrepreneurship. I mean, they had good timing, but this MBA program, which was a hybrid program, meaning some of it was online and some of it was face to face. The students would come to Babson once a month for 1.5 days. They'd fly in Friday. They'd arrive on Friday. They usually had some kind of an event Friday evening, usually a guest speaker or something. They'd have classes all day Saturday and half a day Sunday, and then they'd fly home.
Right.
There were people who came from India for this.
Holy smokes.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was 2 people from India, 1 person from the UK. I mean, it's just remarkable, right? And it goes to show you that I think you're much better off being one of the best in the world at one thing,
right,
than trying to be sort of
Good at
slightly above average in a whole bunch of stuff.
right. Well, that was a great thing that Rice thought up
Yeah.
to do
It was
that.
a good program.
Because
Very
it really
good
fills a niche where somebody wants to get an MBA and they have a full-time job or they're running
Right.
their own company.
Right.
They could go there and get a lot of exposure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yep. Very good. So let's talk about sailing.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me do a quick intro.
Yeah.
And then
I'm not sure how this works. This is the first time I've done something like this.
we're just going to do exactly what we've been doing. And that's just have a conversation.
Okay.
But let me just do a quick intro, and then we'll take it from there. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Sailing and Cruising the East. I'm your host for this podcast, Bela Musitz. Today's guest is Bob Forman. Bob's a very experienced blue water and coastal sailor. He's also got some great race experience, including two transatlantic, boy, that's a mouthful, including 2 transatlantic races. And it's in the Transat, as it's called. It's the world's oldest ocean race, and the first one took place in 1866. So welcome to the podcast, Bob.
Thank you, Bella.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about sort of how you got started in sailing. I'm always kind of curious about sort of, what were the beginnings? What was the germination of this desire to go sailing?
Well, my family had a sailfish, which is sort of like a sunfish.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing.
That's what I started on.
Then went in the Navy and was assigned to an ocean-going minesweeper. And that was home ported in Panama City, Florida. And the Officers Club had a USS Cumshore, which is a 19-foot fish class sailboat. So whenever I wanted, I'd call up the bosun of the watch and say, I want to take the Cumshore out, and they'd have it all set up and everything. And when I came in, I'd say, this has to be fixed or that has to be fixed.
Yeah.
So it was a great time. And St. Andrews Bay is very much like the Great South Bay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too deep. It's sheltered, but you have the thermal winds. So you have good wind and nice places to sail.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning. Then the first boat that I bought myself, my wife and I were going to get married. It was about 6 weeks prior to the wedding, and the deal was supposed to be that I would sell my car and we'd buy living room furniture. Well, I did sell my car, but we didn't buy living room furniture. I figured it's so close to the wedding, I could do just about anything except rob a bank. So I I bought another 19-foot wooden old sailboat, and I was so excited I didn't even check the sails, and the sails had all sorts of holes in them and everything else. But
Yeah.
I fixed it. I fixed that with tape and sailed it for a year or so without that, and then got sails for it. Then the second boat, uh, I won a sales contest, and the prize was $10,000 or a 2-week all expense paid trip around the world.
Oh, wow.
So I convinced my wife that you don't really want to do this, and she was not really into flying at that time. So we went and bought a 28-foot sailboat, Morgan 28. Nice, nice boat.
Yeah.
Then the next boat was a 38-foot Morgan.
And where were you sailing these boats, Bob, at this time? Where were you living?
The 28-foot boat, the Morgan 28, I sailed it on a bay, did a lot of racing.
And when you say bay, what bay are you talking
Great
about?
South Bay.
And that's in New Jersey?
No, that's in Long Island.
Long Island.
Like right now, we live on the Great South Bay.
Okay.
Like Fire Island, to set a location, the Fire Island Lighthouse is 5.8 miles south of us. So when we sit down at the dining room table, we see the lighthouse flashing.
Oh, wow. So that's on the north side of Long Island.
I am.
The North Shore. Yeah.
No. I'm on the north side of the Great South Bay.
Okay.
And Fire Island Lighthouse is on Fire Island.
Got it.
So the 28, we raced on the bay, won a lot of trophies, and we cruised it to the islands, Block Island, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Newport, Bristol, etc. Okay.
Yeah.
Then from there, we bought a Morgan 38, and we raced that on the bay, but it was difficult because it displaced too much water and you get bottom action, which would slow you down. But we still won a lot of races, And then we started doing offshore races, the Block Island race, the Vineyard race, Block Island Race Week, Sandfire race. All right.
And so did you do these on all this racing on your boat?
Yes. Yeah. It's always on my boat.
Yeah.
Okay. And then after that, we cracked the hull falling off a wave coming out of the Gulf Stream. And I didn't realize it was cracked at the time. I knew that we fell a long way, and I could just feel the boat go like that. But when the boat went in the yard, Steve Bryce, who owned the yard, called me up. He says, "Bob, did you hit a buoy?" I says, "No, I never hit a buoy." He says, "Yeah, I guess you didn't. But there's a crack in the side of the hull, right where the chimes are, and it's down to the last layer of fiberglass."
Wow.
So, when we went out in the ocean with the boat would oil can, and you could see the dining room table going up and down.
That's not a reassuring feeling.
My wife said, I can't stop you from going out on a boat, but the kids aren't going with you. So that put a hole in my balloon. But I figured a way out. We went and contracted for a Hinckley Southwest 42.
Very nice.
And Hinckley had built 2 competition boats. Dragonfire, which then became Whitecap, was Charlie. When it was Whitecap, it was Charlie Layton's boat. When it was Dragonfire, it was Hinckley's boat, and they had a rock star crew. Then they built a second one, Foundation, which was also a competition, And the competition boats had a 7-foot keel, which you can't have on the South Bay. So when we did up mine, what we did is we took what they had done, rolled it forward one more generation, and did it on a centerboard boat. So that was my fourth and final boat. But we got her in April of '96 is when we took delivery, and I just sold it about a year ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that's the boat that you did your transatlantic races on and a bunch of other races, right?
Yeah, we did three Bermuda races
Hmm.
on the Morgan 38, and then we did 11 on Jacqueline 4. You know, we did a number of other nearshore races, like the Around the Island race. We did 15 of those. We were first in class 8 times, and we won the whole thing, 165 boats once.
Wow.
The Jacqueline 4, which is the Hinkley Southwest 42, we did 11 Bermuda races, 2 Halifax races, a number of Vineyard races, a number of Block Island races, Block Island Race Week, 2 transatlantic races, 2 Fastnet races, and also did a lot of cruising on her.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then I did a lot of sailing on a boat called Roberta, which was a Hinkley 59. And Bobby and Jean Wells owned that. Rusty Bradford, who at that time headed up service at Hinkley, usually skippered it. When he didn't, I did. And then I did the navigation and sail repair.
Wow.
And the program on that was in the fall, we would take the boat from Stonington, Connecticut to Bermuda, and then from Bermuda down to either Trinidad or Grenada. And then in the spring, we would take it from either St. Martin's or St. Thomas up to Bermuda and then up to Southwest Harbor. And that, every year it was pretty much the same thing.
Wow, that's quite the nice little circle you're doing there.
Yeah. And I use that as my test bed for all my racing software.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Also did the sail repairs on that boat. Rusty would fix everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And we always had a great crew to go with.
Right. Right. So, let's talk a little bit about crew. So when you're doing these campaigns on your boat, you're the captain, so you get to pick the crew. And, how do you sort of do that? What's your process?
Let's start off with what some of the problems are. One of the problems is you got to find somebody that can take off for a month.
Right.
Okay. And you need young guys on the foredeck, and you need a combination of skills. You have to have one fix-it person who could fix, just about anything. Then I would go. I had a group that I sailed with. There was about 16 or 17 or 18 in that group. So I'd usually get like 3 or 4 or 5 from that. Then I'd have to get another whatever to get it up to 7. Okay. And I had a blog on the New York Yacht Club website looking for crew.
Yes.
All right. Word of mouth. And then I would take and interview them. And then I would have them interview 2 or 3 of my regular crew.
Yes.
Because it's not only important that person likes the people he's going to be sailing with, it's also important that I get various opinions on, is this person going to work out? So, and we've gotten some great sailors that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about picking crew, particularly for longer passages. Not only do they have to have the skills,
Right.
that you're looking for, but you have to have this level of compatibility because you're
Right.
together for 24 hours a day for 10, 15, 20 days, whatever it is.
Yeah. Most of them have small boat experience. They have a lot of racing experience.
Yeah.
If you look at the 2015 transatlantic race, uh, I had myself, my daughter races with me. Pound for pound, she's the best sailor in the family. Uh, then I had another friend, Victor Gansey. So that was the three core group of the
Mm-hmm.
core. Uh, Ben Norman had raced with me in the Fastnet race. So I had experience with him, an excellent sailor. Uh, Patrick Gav- Patrick Gavin Patrick Gavin uh, had was a professional sailor, so he could fix anything. All right. Then the seventh member of the crew, I actually replaced somebody. You know, we sailed like 800 miles before the transatlantic race to shake the boat down
Mm.
and
Yeah.
really get a feel for the crew, because once you leave the dock, you got them. They're with you.
Yeah.
So the seventh person, uh, Eric Irwin, uh, was a graduate of the Naval Academy, was a professor at the War College, had skippered a nuclear sub. You know, he and I had been talking since January, but it was always either he had a billet and wasn't available, or I thought didn't need anybody else.
Yeah.
But one person that I thought was going to be pretty good wound up not really paying attention to details, and I had just some sort of reservation in my back of my mind on him. So on the last double overnight, like that was a 300-mile offshoot, we go out to 150 miles and come back 100.
Yeah.
I had both of them on the boat, and it was a no-brainer. And uh, Eric was the guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was a tremendous sailor. And,
Yeah. Cause that's like, when you're captain of the vessel, you have a lot of broad responsibilities.
right.
Um, and talk
It,
to me a little. Go ahead.
go ahead.
I was going to ask you sort of about what you do about sort of what's your safety regiment or protocol? What when you bring your crew together, what type of briefings do you do, et cetera?
Well, first off, I have a priority list. 3 things: safety, have fun, and be competitive. And in that order. Most important thing is safety, and then have a good time, and then be competitive. Um, every year we always look to what can we do to make the boat go faster, or us have to sail less distance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh, as I said before, everybody has to get trained. We have to do safety at sea, in the water training. Okay, we have to have 2 people that go to first responder uh, medical course,
Yeah.
wilderness first responder, um, and then it's just practice, practice, practice.
So oftentimes when you enter these organized races, um, they have sort of a set of requirements that people
Right,
have to do these.
right.
Now, the ones that you just mentioned, like sort of the first aid skills, safety at sea courses, is that typically a requirement of the
That's a
organizer, or was
requirement.
that your requirement?
That's that's their requirement.
Got it.
Okay, different races have, depending how far offshore you're going, uh, you know, it depends on how strict they're going to be on it. But
Yes.
uh,
Yes. Now let's talk just a little bit about the transatlantic races. I think
uh,
you were in 2 of them, if I remember correctly.
yes,
So approximately how many days does that take?
the first one took 19 days.
Uh-huh.
The second one took 18 days. We actually sailed further in that race than we did in the first race.
Yeah.
We averaged like 7.5 knots, which for a boat with a 31.5 foot waterline, it's pretty fast.
Yeah.
And that's a good example of safety. The first couple of days of that race was like champagne sailing, 10 to 15 knots, and wind was like after the beam. We came across a pod of Atlantic white-sided dolphins, which numbered probably 1,000. And then when we talked to the experts in that area, they said they've seen pods as big as 10,000.
Wow.
So it's really amazing. As far out as you can see, there were dolphins, and they just kept coming at us and coming at us and coming at us. But from a safety standpoint, and sailing is great, a lot of fun, but if you're not careful, bad things happen. In the Bermuda race this past year, the skipper of one boat, Morgan and Marietta, wasn't hooked on. They had a rogue wave, washed him over, and they couldn't get him back. He eventually got him back, but he had passed away.
Yeah.
So you just got to be so careful. Anyway, we had the first 3 days of champagne sailing. Then this low came in and it started intensifying, and it was about 750 miles across, and that low was pressing up against the big high. The winds in the center were projected to be over 60 knots. And I decided life is too short. I'm not going to do that. So the expedition software, you could simulate, plug in, well, I don't want to experience winds over 35 knots, and it would program out a course for you. And that's what we did. We jogged to the east, or to the southwest, southeast. Got jogged to the southeast and got about 80 miles further out from the center of the low. And we still saw winds, as high as 46 and probably touching 50.
Wow.
And waves that were 15 to 25 with an occasional 30-footer.
Yeah. Yeah. So this particular race, this transatlantic race, leaves Newport, Rhode Island, if I remember correctly?
Right. It leaves from Newport, Rhode Island, and it goes to Lizard, which is on the south coast of England.
Yeah.
And it's just west of Plymouth.
Okay. So do you sort of take the Great Circle route, kind of like the airplanes? You follow the airplanes?
If you've ever flown to Heathrow,
yeah,
it's about the same route.
Okay.
Because the further north you go, the closer the longitudinal lines get, and the shorter the distance will be.
Yeah. Now, I have flown to Heathrow numerous times, and I can remember sometimes seeing a lot of white, not clouds, but frozen water.
Frozen water.
Did you have to deal with icebergs?
Yes, we had to deal with icebergs, and it was an exclusion zone, which mapped out where the Canadian ice charts projected there were going to be icebergs. So you had to stay south of that.
And that was initiated by the organizers. They defined that exclusion zone.
Right.
Yeah.
There was one for Nantucket Shoals. There was a mark you had to honor at Nantucket Shoals. Then there was one a little further out for the right whale breeding area. Mm-hmm. And then there was the one for the icebergs.
Hi, listeners. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Bob as much as I did. And please listen to the next episode as well. It's not out yet. It'll be out in a week or so, as I normally release podcast episodes every other week. As always, thank you for listening. As I've mentioned before, you can also now find these podcasts on YouTube. Just search for Sailing the East in YouTube, and you can listen to them there or in your favorite podcasting application. And we also have a Patreon page if you'd like to support the podcast. You can find that at Patreon/Sailing the East. Thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, tell your friends about it and do a share. We really are growing our audience now, and we really appreciate all of our listeners. So thanks again, and see you in the next episode.